Hello, Skin Angels, and welcome to the Skin Angels podcast. I'm Peter Leo, dermatologist, investor, and one of the founders of Skin Angels. Before we begin, a quick disclosure. Many of the companies we discuss are early-stage ventures, and I may serve as an advisor, investor, or collaborator with some of them. From time to time, other members of Skin Angels may also have financial interests in these companies. This podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. It reflects our opinions and experiences as clinicians, scientists, and investors who care deeply about innovation in dermatology and skin health. Nothing discussed here should be considered medical advice, investment advice, or a recommendation to buy or sell any security. Our goal is simple: to explore new ideas, highlight promising technologies, and help connect the dermatology community with the people building the future of skincare and skin science. Thanks for being part of Skin Angels. Let's get started. Today, I get to talk to Dr. Adam Friedman, Professor and Chair of Dermatology, Residency Program Director, and Director of Translational Research at the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences. Dr. Friedman, thank you so much for joining us today. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey?
Sure. Well, that is definitely opening a very wide door. How much time we got here, Peter? So I think from the perspective of why we're here for this podcast, I kind of stumbled into the kind of world of drug development and by default business development, which I think we don't get a lot of education on in our journeys as physicians, circa 2005. So we're talking about a relatively long time ago. Big year. That's, when Grey's Anatomy first launched. And I bring that up because my daughter not only has watched every episode, is now starting from scratch again, which that's a quite an effort given they're like 1,000 seasons at this point.
Amazing.
Yeah. Wow. Just making all us doctors look damn sexy in form-fitted scrubs, which of course clearly we all wear. But that's besides the point. So for me, I was doing research with my father, and trying, actually at the time, was actually thinking more about going after radiation oncology. I was collaborating with the Department of Radiation Oncology, trying to develop a mitigation strategy for radiation dermatitis. And it was actually through this work that I got interested in dermatology in the first place from a research angle. But we were working with this platform that was actually being utilized to study protein dynamics. My father was working on artificial blood, and to make fake blood, you have to know what happens when blood goes from deoxygenated to oxygenated. Things happen real fast. It's called cooperativity. And you have to know how that transition occurs, how that protein changes. And you have to slow things down. So we were using this, what's called sol gel, to trap proteins, hemoglobin, myoglobin, as they shifted from oxygenated to deoxygenated. And, I'm looking at this technology and, I was wondering, well, you can put things you can trap things in it. You can get gas through. Could things actually come out of it? And I think that really sets the tone for inventorship in general, which is it's observing something, and then kind of asking a lot of questions, being curious. I think really, and this is true, I think, for business development too, it's like you always got to be curious and ask lots of questions. And that's really when the work starts. Because I think every day we observe things and we're distracted, we're busy. We call it multitasking. It's really, dilution of effort. And I think if you focus on an observation, ask the right questions, that then leads to the next step. And so I started throwing other things into this sol gel, this kind of, and the name is, even though this is not what the name is meant for, I love the name because it starts as a solution. It hydrolyzes through a chemical reaction. It forms a gel, as the name infers, and you trap. In this case, I was looking at melanin. You could trap a whole wide range of things in these gels, and I'd kind of smush it up and make a paste and see if I can apply it to the skin of these poor mice that we were radiating. And one day I'm like, well, this is really not super practical. Like, it was kind of a gritty gel, and then I was injecting it, intradermally, and I'm like, well, no one's actually going to allow us to do that. And so I'm like, what happens if I dry it out? I'm so curious to see what happens if I dry it. Maybe that makes it easier to apply. And so I lyophilized it, because everyone has a lyophilizer down the street. That's one of the benefits of being an academic center. And I come in and it's this fine powder. It formed this like fine, in this case, black powder. I was like, okay, that's interesting. Didn't expect that. And then, of course, in a similar fashion, walk down the hall to the analytical imaging facility and ask them to do electron microscopy. Again, you need to have access to these things to answer these questions. And the next thing I know, I find out that I'm dealing with now nanoparticles, small little capsules that are at the billionth of a meter scale. And to me, it's like, okay, I guess I do nanotechnology now. And that's kind of where it all started in now understanding what does that even mean? What occurs at the nanoscale? Why is that important? Why is it valuable for drug delivery, dermatology? Because I started kind of pivoting to thinking about dermatology. And that was around 2005. And so we're obviously many years later. And I think that's part two is expect a long journey. Nothing, an invention, a recognition of something unique and novel that your peers couldn't automatically assume would evolve or happen. That's how you actually have an invention that's patentable. It has to be something that, for example, if you and I were sitting around spontaneously, wouldn't have the same thought. Like it wouldn't be like a Step Brothers moment where you both say Velociraptor, right? It's that I could come up with this and my peers who have the same education, same know-how wouldn't automatically come up with it. And yeah, I mean, it really took off there to then go backwards, understand what was going on, understand the chemistry, understand the behavior of these particles, how you encapsulate things in, how things come out of them, how they get through the skin, into the skin, hair follicle. So it's been certainly a long time. And even now, there's still a lot of evolution going on in terms of trying to capitalize on what was discovered now decades ago. And I think that's you got to be prepared for that time suck. This is a long haul. When drugs come out, it's not like someone came up with it the day before. And so appreciating the amount of time and investment you need to put into it, it will set your expectations at the right level so you don't get frustrated if the week after someone is knocking on your door and offering you a contract or a licensing agreement to take your product off your hands.
I love it. And I love that nanotechnology was sort of thrust upon you. I think about the quote from the physicist Richard Feynman, who said there's plenty of room at the bottom, right? He was very prescient in thinking about this field, but you stumbled upon it and really found this. And now the question I want to ask you next is, how did you go from understanding that you had something here, something really interesting, and some, of course, really great ideas and tremendous passion about wanting to solve problems, but how did you actually build it? How did you put together the right people, the resources, especially given that you are deeply embedded in academics? So I'm fascinated by how you bridge that gap.
Yeah. So I think the first and easy answer to that is failed many times. And I think that's okay. And it's not a loss if you learn from it. I mean, that's so freaking corny. And actually, I think I have that line. I never lose, either I win or I learn, on my desk. Super low budget. It's like literally printed out. It's color though. It was a color printout. So I did spring for that. So I think, again, being an academic center, there is some benefit to that. So I would argue probably every academic center has a tech transfer, Office of Biotechnology. So next step was, okay, wow, we have something. We have discovered a way to make these delivery capsules, these nanoparticles that we can put, and we found very quickly we could put a lot of different things in them. Not to mention, just as an aside, and this has kind of not been in focus for me in recent years, but was for many years, is we discovered that these particles facilitated long-range proton and electron transfer. And so we could allow for very simple reduction chemistry in the particles. And why this is important is one of the foci was on creating particles that could release nitric oxide, a very important gas, certainly has been kind of in the limelight of dermatology for on and off for years now, but more recently now certainly putting its stamp on our practice with a nitric oxide releasing technology that's not mine, that is indicated for molluscum contagiosum. But, what's so tough about this really incredible, very simple diatomic gaseous molecule that we are making right now, by the way, to regulate blood pressure, fight infection, regulate cell turnover, you name it. I mean, almost does everything, is that it's very elusive. It's very short-lived, and its site of generation in our bodies to its point of contact are millionths of a meter. So the idea here was to create something that could release physiologic or maybe super physiologic concentrations over time to engage all of those properties, because they're also in the same vein that we're making it right now. There are many disease states where we're not making enough of it. I mean, diabetes is a great example. Intravascular nitric oxide production is stymied in diabetes. So the idea would be to kind of replace what's lost, like so many things we do with our therapeutics. So that's just an aside, but really, at the same time, while we're going backwards to understand what is it we have, how does it behave, there's then also the other part of like protecting what you have. And again, being an academic center confers some benefit in that we have this office in place to help us with this, because we don't learn anything about this, and probably we should. There probably should be a little bit of a built-in MBA in medical school. And so the next step is you have this idea, it's novel, you go to the literature, make sure no one else has come up with this idea. At the time, was there even Google search? I don't remember. It's totally a blur. Probably it was like MySpace or AOL or something. And so you go to this tech transfer office and you submit a proposal for patent protection. And so that's what we did. So they have this standard form. You fill it out. You explain, why is this impactful? What is the data you have to date? You submit pictures, figures, what have you. And then a committee of physicians and scientists at the institution will decide, is this worth it for us as an institution to prosecute this? Because there are various different stages of patent protection. And as you go along, in many years, it gets more and more expensive. So the institution has to decide, is it worth paying for this? Is it worth our while? Because there will be a return on investment down the road. Now, just FYI, if your institution decides not to cover this, they then give you the right of first refusal to do it on your own. And I think many people do. So obviously, if you're not an academic institution, you're on your own, you have an idea, you identify something that's novel that, again, your peers wouldn't automatically come up with, you can go ahead and do this. And the first step is submitting a provisional patent, which gives 1 year of protection. That's relatively inexpensive. I think it's, a couple hundred, maybe $1,000. That's the cheap part. It's after that year, where you've been spending then hopefully that year to generate data that really supports all the claims in your patent application, that's when it gets a little bit pricier, and you absolutely need a patent lawyer to help you with that. And there's the U.S. submission and then the worldwide submissions. There are two different pieces that can happen simultaneously. So if you're an academic, that is built in, but you're also giving up some ownership, because most institutions have kind of, a setup of, for example, if, let's say, your product takes off, let's say a company licenses your product from the institution, it's an academic patent now, usually it's the rule of threes. So a third would go to all the inventors on the patent. And we can certainly talk about what does it mean to be an author on a patent and how to think about that critically. A third goes to the lab, which is an important thing, because let's say you have a patent through a center and you leave that center, that third that's supposed to go to research, poof, that goes away because you're not there anymore. And then a third goes to institution. That's usually the setup. It varies from place to place. So in parallel to doing all this research and understanding how this behaves in vitro, preclinical models, you name it, we're also trying to protect ourselves. But the other piece of that biotech transfer or tech transfer office is then also finding partners. And the ability to do that is highly variable. And I've seen that from institution to institution. For us at where I was at Einstein, we definitely were set up on some bad blind dates. So the current company that has licensed the patent, Xylo Therapeutics, it took a lot of frogs to get to a prince, so to speak. But we had several iterations of companies that would license it, would work with them. And what I learned very quickly is you could have the greatest science on the planet. If the business team doesn't have those same chops, you're dead in the water. And so I think Peter, I relayed to you in the past, and we've chatted about this before, how I'd go in actually with my father, father-son duo, which has its own kind of cachet. And we talk about the science and the clinical translation. I mean, it was the perfect bench to bedside kind of discussion, get, rev up the crowd like a headliner. And then the business team would come in after us and they walk and be like, nope, not happening. And we'd be like, what the hell just happened? So to your point about how do you put the team together, putting the right team together is so important. And I think we are not equipped to do that on our own in our own basic medical training. And so I think that there has been the emergence of obviously groups that help with that. We've seen that, which is great. But I think if your academic center working hand in hand with your institution, because it's in everyone's interest for you have the right team and kind of getting a take on what the tech transfer office is thinking in terms of what's needed and giving your input as that licensing agreement goes into effect, I think is hugely important to save time. But yeah, it didn't happen overnight. It took years to really get linked together with a group that knew what they were doing. And so now there is a company with a GMP facility and a whole, exec committee and research team and all that stuff. And it's only with that then you can have multiple product lines emerge, because for us, it's a platform technology. It's a drug delivery system. So the diversity of opportunities, how to, utilize this to deliver undeliverables, or products that have limitations in their bulk or standard form, really sky's the limit. But you need that infrastructure to even start to think about that translation.
I really love that this theme comes up over and over on Skin Angels, the idea that no matter how good the idea is, it's really dependent on the people. The team is the secret. So you obviously endured a lot of different hardships and you kissed a lot of frogs, as you said. What was the turning point? Was there a moment when you felt that things were actually really starting to work and you realized, okay, this is going to happen?
Yeah. I think, I'm still, feeling that a little bit. I think the turning point was, and actually, how even Xylo Therapeutics came into be was, the head of it was that we actually met through one of these previous companies. And I think, I think nothing's ever lost, right? I think that with every failure, you learn something different, you learn something new, but also you meet other people. So I have now collaborators and colleagues that I have met along the way through these various iterations of companies that formed around the intellectual property that I wouldn't have known otherwise, and have really been incredible partners in different initiatives. So there are definitely good things came out of it. So Scott Pancoast, who is the head of Xylo, I met through a previous iteration of one of these companies that formed around the technology. And from day one, honestly, I was very impressed with his approach, his calm demeanor. It was very clear. I'm sure you, in your experiences, with Skin Angels, you meet people, there's just something about them. You're like, this person gets it. This person really gets it. And so when he proposed kind of taking this on, definitely significant optimism. And I think just knowing that someone that I just had that good feeling, and I think it's important to trust your gut to some degree. I think that his approach and his plan and the people that he surrounded himself with really was a very big glimmer of optimism, and then just seeing things evolve. And then I think, no doubt, the first time the technology was employed in something that a human being was using, the fact that someone was putting something on their skin, and actually it was before something was commercialized, but actually just kind of safety testing, phase 1 testing, that leap from the bench, which is pretty much that's the only place it was. And that's another point I want to mention is, we had all this great preclinical data, and in my mind, I'm like, hey, that should be enough. Even like, for example, in the acne space, when we look at the leap from preclinical bench to approval to the clinical trial space, there's really no animal model for acne. And so there's usually this giant leap from like in vitro to clinical studies. And so my impression was, oh, okay, great. Like that can move along really quickly. And maybe this wasn't always the case, but in recent years, companies are a little hesitant to jump in and partner if you're not pretty far along the kind of phase 1, 2, 3, pathway. And so a lot of companies want to see like probably phase 2 data, not 3, if you're thinking about an RX indication, before they're willing to partner, because the risk hopefully is lower. And we've seen, especially in acne, we saw many companies have come out strong with phase 2 data and then phase 3 just fall apart, owing probably to the FDA putting such high bars to succeed. So I think there's a lot more hesitation getting in early. And so that was another surprising thing. I thought like, oh, hey, we have this cool technology. Great. Look, we have publications and JID, all this great. And they're like, no, until you have some good clinical data, call us then or lose our number, is kind of the mentality. So, having that almost phase one toxicity data, knowing that a person had this product that I stumbled upon as a medical student applied to their skin. I'm like, all right, this is real. Like, we're putting this on people. And now a lot of people are using these products in different flavors, which the most rewarding piece of all of this, that something that, again, observed as a medical student, put now 20 plus years into, that people are utilizing various flavors of this platform to address different dermatologic issues.
It's remarkable. So you're either winning or you're learning. But is
Yes,
there
I
is
like
there
that.
anything if you could go back to the beginning of this journey, is there any advice that you would give yourself, any practical things you would say, or would you just say keep going?
I think, and I think I would set my expectations a little bit better. And I think, and this is not just me, it's funny, I even think about, the conversations I have with my father even now, about, what's verbal versus on paper. I think one of the things that I learned very quickly was, people will say, "Oh, this is amazing. We're going to do this," or, "Hey, the money's coming." And until it's in writing, it means nothing. And I found myself, I can think back, I found myself, getting very excited about a potential licensing opportunity or commercialization, based on conversations, and then it just kind of fell through. And I felt like that was a lot of wasted energy, not to mention, when it comes to product development, credibility, your reputation, and your reliability when it comes to anything like, hey, this is going to happen. And then if it doesn't, you kind of undercut yourself. So I think that early on, when there would be some positive feedback, someone said, "Oh, we're going to make this happen. This is definitely going to happen," and then it doesn't. Not necessarily shouting from the rooftops that that this is coming. I think that it's like, the kid who cried wolf, right? If you say like, "Oh, the money's coming," ultimately you undermine your credibility. And so I think that just setting expectations, but also what are the things that should be the sign that something is absolutely green light or green lit, versus, being cautiously optimistic. The other thing, which I still remember, this was when I was still at Einstein. So now it's over probably 11 years ago. We were meeting with a group, and I don't even remember who it was, but someone said, be careful of the dilutional effect. So one of the valuable things of a platform technology or drug delivery technology is that you can do everything, right? So if you could put anything in your particles, you make them more stable, safer, more effective. In essence, you could do anything. And while that sounds great, that actually can be a detriment, because you spread yourself too thin. You have too many, irons in the fire, and nothing actually gets done. And I took that to heart. So really being focused, and in a piecemeal way, like focus on one project, one indication, get that to the point where maybe you can pass it off. And that's kind of the idea behind a platform company, is you license the technology combined with an active. And so, for example, the technology is in Bosley MD foam products. So Bosley MD is a hair care company, over-the-counter company. So, the platform is being used to deliver an active from another company to get the active where it needs to be, because that's the idea of delivery, is improving delivery, getting something where it needs to be to actually have an effect. And that's, kind of licensed out. So you want to get something to a certain level, but when you can actually hand it off, someone else can take over, versus try to do too much at once, then you get nothing done. I think that really resonated with me. And I think it's so easy to be the kid in the candy shop and say, "Oh my God, look at all these things we can do. Let's do them." And you'll fail because you won't get anything done. So I think that, staying focused, kind of checking in with yourself and your team, make sure you're not diluting your efforts, so that you can kind of knock things off one at a time, I think is hugely important. So I think having realistic expectations, not diluting your efforts. You have to do it to some degree, but not to the point where you undermine multiple parallel pathways would be the advice I give myself. And also, the point about the teams, recognizing that the business side is probably more essential than the science, matched with also how visible you are. Now, I know I'm giving like a million different things, but I think
I love it.
the other thing is also the visibility of what you're doing, and having control of that narrative and having partnerships with those who can get that information out there. I think, it's funny. I think I told you the other day too, that I think the first time I heard your name or saw your name was on one of your practical dermatology videos, now probably like 20 years ago. And that was actually, you were the impetus for me even reaching out to ask if I could, participate somehow with DermTube, because I saw a bunch of your videos and they were just fantastic. But, utilizing various vehicles for communication and how important it is to get the right message about what you're doing out there. That's another thing. I'm at this point, definitely I feel very comfortable with it. Have created a lot of partnerships with these outlets, but I think certainly earlier on, utilizing that more so, I think, is so essential to success, especially today. So how you communicate your findings, not just to your peers, but to the business community, to the consumer, is so essential for success as well. And we've seen that with, skincare lines that are, started by celebrities that have no science, but are crushing it. It's all about the visibility and the messaging. So learning how to message your technology, your science in a meaningful way that resonates with your target audience is not easy, but something definitely needs to be worked on early.
Thank you for dropping all these pearls of wisdom. I feel like you've had at least 3 careers worth of experience. So my last question as we wrap up is, what's next for Adam Friedman? What are you thinking about in terms of things interesting for you or for your endeavors, or maybe even at the top of the mountain that you stand upon right now in dermatology in the skin space? What looks exciting for the near future?
Too much. I think we are living in a time that is so unparalleledly, if that's even a word, exciting, because we have so much research innovation going on. I mean, the last 10 years, the number of FDA-approved prescription therapies for a wide array of conditions that previously had no advanced systemics is remarkable. And so for me, I think, we have, with this technology, we have several products that are on the market on the OTC side. So, I mentioned Bosley MD that utilizes the nanoparticles for delivery of an active for hair thinning. We have a product under the umbrella of C Elements MD that is nano-encapsulated cannabidiol that we showed in a clinical trial. And I have to give a shout out to my one of my derm fathers, Brian Berman, with whom I got to undertake this clinical study that was more translational, in that he ran a clinical arm applying this product to the skin of some healthy volunteers to then ultimately blast them with UVA radiation, so then I can get the tissue he took to show that we could protect against the expected DNA damage from high UVA exposure in general. And it's really a nice full circle story, because Brian and my father have been longtime friends from college. So this kind of familial connection, and certainly Brian has been an incredible mentor in my career. So being able to do that with him, and now having this JAD published clinical trial, a product that's on the market that has the chops to support the claims we're making in terms of a protective effect to prevent the expected impact of UVA damage, which obviously accelerates skin aging, is kind of what we're talking about, but there's probably more going on there. So that's the thing that's out there. And then there is a product called Scar Blast that contains an ingredient that focuses on cellular mitochondria that requires stabilization with our nanoparticles. So clearly all over the map, but I'd love to get this into RX space. And there have been a couple initiatives, one in the cutaneous lupus space, encapsulating anandamide, which is an endocannabinoid. We've actually have published in animal models on nano encapsulation of anandamide for the treatment of cutaneous lupus in a very well-established animal model of systemic lupus that these poor mice get skin disease that looks like chronic cutaneous lupus, and really this topical performed very well. So we actually are collaborating with Vicky Wirth at Penn to hopefully get that on track. But yeah, I'd love to see this in the RX space too, more so of anything going after underserved areas. I think that's one of the reasons why I have such a affinity for off-label therapeutics. I think that as dermatologists, we are all off-label bandits. But I mean that from the most positive, like, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid type, bandits, like the lovable bandits, because we have to be so creative because we're so limited in terms of on-label options for the 3,000 plus diseases that we manage. So I'd love to go after something that has nothing. And so certainly cutaneous lupus, from a topical perspective, there's no indication. Hydroxychloroquine has the DLE indication, but that's about it. So I'd love to, move this to the RX world, specifically focusing on unmet needs in dermatology. And I'm really inspired by the rapid introduction of so many new therapeutics. I think that we've really seen a shift in the FDA in terms of the very clear pathway and also openness to hearing the patient side in terms of deciding whether something should be approved or not. But we've never had so many drugs approved in such a short amount of time. So I'm hopeful we can kind of get this helping patients that we typically only use off-label options.
Truly exciting, truly inspiring. Dr. Adam Friedman, Professor and Chair of Dermatology at the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.